Hello, and welcome to the No Bad Questions podcast, where I try to learn in a conversational manner by sitting down with people who have interesting careers, important lessons to tell, or inspiring stories. I hope that you learn something too. If you want to support the podcast, please follow or subscribe on your platform of choice. You can also like or comment to boost the algorithms or share out to your network to make sure it gets more views. But ultimately, and what I hope you choose to do, is listen to the very end. With that, we'll start today's podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the No Bad Questions podcast. My guest today is Edward Marx. Edward has a long, and by that I mean that as a positive, accomplished background. I'm going to read almost all of it because it is pertinent to where we're going to start on our conversation today, so bear with me. Edward serves as Chief Executive Officer of Divergent. Divergent is an advisory and solutions provider on what matters most to their client partners. His Divergent team has recreated consulting from the point of view of a health system executive, not a vendor. Edward is active on health systems boards, writing books, and speaks globally on topics ranging from leadership to digital transformation. Edward was Chief Digital Officer for Tech Mahindra Health and Life Sciences, a $6 billion digital transformation company. Prior to joining Tech Mahindra, Edward was Global Chief Information Officer at Cleveland Clinic, which is when I met him. His responsibilities included virtual care, digital solutions, and information technology. Prior to joining Cleveland Clinic, Edward served as CIO for a number of large health organizations. Concurrent with his healthcare career, he served 15 years in the Army Reserve as a combat medic and combat engineer officer. He's won numerous awards, including the HIMSS/Chime 2013 CIO of the Year. He's been recognized by CIO and Computer World as one of the top 100 leaders. Becker's Healthcare named Edward as the 2015 top healthcare IT executive and the 2016 17 most influential people in healthcare lists. Edward is the author of multiple books, including the 2019 healthcare bestseller Voices of Innovation and the 2020 bestseller Healthcare Digital Transformation: How Consumerism, Technology, and Pandemic Are Accelerating the Future. He's currently working on a book for the Mayo Clinic on patient experience. He received his Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Master of Science in Design, Merchandising, and Consumer Sciences from Colorado State University. He's married to Simran, and hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Yeah. They have 5 children, 4 grandchildren, and he is a 9+ year member of Team USA Triathlon and represents his country at championship events around the world. Edward, thank you so much for joining me here on No Bad Questions.
Thanks, David, for having me. Yeah, and you know, all that can never be done by a single person, so it's really about the team. So we'll probably get into that a little bit later, but all those accolades, truly, I'm really this very average person, but I just happen to be lucky enough to connect with some above average organizations and people. So thank you for having me anyways on the podcast.
Well, and maybe that's what we'll end up getting into first, because my first question is, you've got all these, whether I'm going to call hobbies, that's probably not the right word, but I mean, all these extracurriculars, perhaps is a better word. And you're also been the CEO for some really big organizations, really important and innovative organizations. How do you balance, being a combat medic and being a triathlete and a father and a good husband and an author and all these things, and excel, because you're named a top, person, and excel, not just show up for work, but excel at your day job? How do you balance all that?
Well, I gave you one reason already, is having a great team, right? One is too small a number for greatness. It's never good to be alone. And so if you can surround yourself with people that are smarter than yourself and serve at great organizations, then it makes it a lot easier. The second thing is I'm not so much a believer in life balance as I am sort of life integration. And so the more you can put things together, the more you can accomplish. So an example would be like in triathlon. I got into triathlon. I used to do tennis and other sports, and I got into triathlon because of my firstborn son. And it's a long story for some other time, but it was a way for him to be athletic, to get exercise without anyone making fun of him, when he was a kid. And So we started on that journey, and then even after he got to the point he became top 4 in the country for his age group, like 15 to 19 at the time. And even after that and during that, we did triathlons together. So I was able to spend time with my son, and one of my daughters did it as well, and do triathlon. So it's kind of mixing both together. So whenever you can do that, or let's say you travel, like, you travel to an event. Well, what do? Do you watch a movie on the airplane, or maybe you read, or, you listen to your favorite podcast? And so it's really like bringing different parts of your life together, and suddenly you're accomplishing more. Like writing. It's like, in order to keep up with everything, you have to read a lot, right? You have to listen a lot to great programs like this. And so, that's what I do instead of, playing video games, for lack of a better example. And
Sure.
so I'm feeding myself, and then I'm learning, and then I'm pouring myself back out. And that's maybe the last thing I would say about that is I think we have a responsibility as people and organizations pour into us and family, we have to pour it back out. And so it's just kind of a natural flow, and I call it integration. So, and I do take rest, trust me. So you have to have rest, and you have to get sleep and all that kind of stuff.
I think that's great. And I think that is something that I've heard from others who have been on here when we've talked about, managing or integrating the work-life elements. And I think those like yourself who are doing that successfully really are role models for a lot of us. It's something I've been trying to work on in the last year, trying to balance doing more extracurriculars, watching TV less. I'm a generation, we grew up with video games, so I do still some of that, but it's more structured. It's not just, hey, whenever I'm sitting idle, I have some friends I want to stay in touch with that don't live local anymore. So we'll get on and we'll connect virtually. So I'm maintaining a friendship. We're getting a creative outlet, but I do that for, 2 hours a week, not 20 hours a week. So I think that's been a focus for me. I'm looking at folks like yourself and others who I've talked to here on the podcast, all the way back to episode 1, and Shay Eskew about that work he does to try to integrate his life. So I really appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, Shay's awesome. And yeah, you hit on probably the biggest time suck is TV, right? And so it's easy to see people say, how do you take time to write a book? How do you do this or that? You just don't watch TV. And it's kind of fun. So anyways, yeah, that's good advice that you've heard, that you've brought out before in your program.
So one of the things as well in your background, and I don't know that I went over all the details today because there was even more to your background, but I think you're working on a book or have written a book with your spouse as well. So what's it like working with your spouse? Because I know I talked to some other folks who are in business with their spouse or work with their spouse, and I think that for some of us that would work well. For some of us it might not. What's been that experience in terms of partnering with your spouse to write a book? Yeah,
we definitely are better when we have our own time together. Time individually. So yeah, and you're right, David. It depends on the couple. Some people love to be together all the time, and some that would not be a good thing. For us, we need both. So she definitely has independent time and independent pursuits, as well as myself. But we both have this heart. We're both second married, and we both learned a lot from our first marriages, and we have this heart like to help other people that are in a similar situation. And so we wrote a book together. So fortunately, I had some time off. I had a couple of weeks, and again, it's that network. So so an acquaintance of mine heard that we were looking for a place to go write, and he's like, "Hey, my place in Buenos Aires is empty. I'm taking my family. We're going to be traveling through." They lived in Buenos Aires. They were like traveling through Chile, like for a month.
Oh, wow!
We're like, "Take our house," and we're like, "Wow, what a blessing!" So we went there for 2 weeks. We did the touristy things, of course, and did some tango, which is another passion of ours. But we spent time together every day, like 3 or 4 hours every day, just cranking through this book and writing. And it actually worked out okay. So
wow.
We didn't get any arguments. We each sort of agreed on, the chapter structure, the book structure, and then we each had individual assignments to go do that part, and then we'd edit each other's work, and it worked pretty well. So the book is done. We just need to figure out the appropriate time to release it.
Okay, great. Well, sometimes life has moments that click for people. And I think that, I read a metaphor or a cliche a couple years ago that is sort of like today's successes or today's luck is essentially sown by seeds 20 years ago. Work you did, preparation you did 20 years ago. I'm butchering that saying, but I think the point is that I'm trying to make, you had that opportunity to sort of seclude yourselves and write this book because you had done networking with somebody and because you were a professional, upstanding person who somebody would invite into their home. And, you know, what we lay down today may not pay off tomorrow. And it may not even behoove us to look at it as it must pay off, right? In terms of our relationships, but we got to do the good work now if we want to have any possibility of the success later. So I think that's a great subtext point in what you said.
Yeah, no, David, you're right on. It's like people are looking for immediate gratification, and you can get that some way, somehow, but you really may be shortchanging your long-term success. So you have to think long-term. You know, it's hard for people to do that. So, you know, a lot of people ask me for career advice, or I'll tell them stuff, and then they'll do it for like 3 weeks, you know, and then they stop. And they're not thinking long term because, you know, again, the sense of the urgency, the tyranny of the urgent. Mm-hmm. I got to do this now. I got to do this now. And so they forget about like laying that foundation for the long term. And you know, it's similar. You know, it's similar concept, right? When we think about retirement, you put certain money away every paycheck, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But people won't make that same investment in other parts of their life, whether it's eating right, working out, that sort of thing. So they shortchange themselves. And so they wonder like 20 years later, like, gee, I haven't really done much. I haven't really accomplished much. So the secret is, you just revealed it, is to really think long-term and to take steps now that will serve you well in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me pivot a little bit. Still kind of on how you're doing all this stuff in your career journey and ask, so psychology and design to CIO. What made that leap occur?
Yeah, well, I chose psychology only because I was flunking out of college. So
okay,
I had a 1.6 GPA my freshman year. I was trying to get back in school. I was like, I was just out of control. I didn't have vision for my life, and I was drinking a lot. And so I literally had a 1.6, and I got kicked out of school. And in order to get back, I was put on probation, had lost all my financial aid, had to take. I took a couple courses, got B's in them. So slowly trying to up my grade. And then I was also trying to become an Army officer because, as you mentioned earlier, I was a combat medic already, but I wanted to become an officer and, you know, get my degree. So when I looked at all the programs, who would take this person that has probably at that point, it was like now up to a 1.7, you know, into the school. And I guess psychology, they were desperate for students. Probably some sort of payment mechanism in the background. So I met with the dean. I still remember the meeting to this day. And I told him, hey, my life changed. You know, I had a bad experience, but I'm going to become an Army officer. And so he let me in. And so I'm very grateful. And my grades did improve. I started getting 4.0 and I went on to graduate school. So that's how the psych, but the benefit of the psych was general degree where you learn a little bit about people. It's not like you become a psychologist, but you learn a little bit about people and getting along with people. And so I think it helped shape who I am as a leader and how to get along with other people. So that's one thing. But the design, you know, also was sort of a mistake. And there's a very interesting story that goes along with it. But for the sake of time, we'll skip over that interesting story. But the design, you know, the basically is we had our first child by then. I decided not to go full time in the Army. I stayed in the Army Reserve for a couple of lifestyle reasons. And then I was like, well, who will take me? Because I still didn't have above a 3.0. So even though I started 1.6 and started getting 4.0s, I was still like a 2.9, I think, when I graduated. So to get into graduate school and to get a stipend and to get a graduate teaching assistantship, the design department made me that offer. So they're like, okay, we'll take the fact that you don't have a 3.0 and we'll give you scholarship and a graduate teaching assistantship. So I was like, okay, I need to get my master's because, you know, the psych degree is worth, the price of a Pizza Hut coupon. And so it's like, okay, let's get this degree. But I learned so much because I took interior design, apparel design, merchandise, fashion, all these different design type courses. And later in my career, now it's really coming into play because it really is about experience, whether we're talking clinician experience or patient experience or employee experience. It's like, it's all about design and the thought process behind design, human-centered design. So it actually helped me without me knowing it at the time, but it did check the box, just to be frank, everyone, in order to become, a senior executive, right, you have to have a master's degree. It checked that box, but I learned so much. I coveted that experience.
I appreciate that. And I like talking to people with some unconventional pathways. I have one myself. I went to my undergrad was, essentially in TV and video production. I wanted to be Quentin Tarantino or something like that. And I realized that wasn't for me. And I'm sure much to the detriment or dismay of my parents, who I was blessed enough to have them finance that. I really didn't use that degree when I graduated, except to check a box of having a degree. But later I realized that I did learn a lot in that program that helped, which is project management, influencing without authority, things like this, where you want to get people to do stuff you want, and you're a student filmmaker, you go beg the local restaurant to let you film on a Sunday or something, so I did learn things, but it's not, it may not appear that way, right, at first. And so I love your story because it A, I relate to it, but B, I think it can help people out there who maybe got a degree and are like, man, what do I do with this? I loved it when I was 22 and now I'm 27, 28, 30, 35. What the heck am I supposed to do with this degree that maybe isn't what I still have a passion for or isn't monetizable? Well, there's lessons to be learned from any given coursework, right? So I love that.
Did you go on to get your master's degree?
I did in healthcare administration. So once I kind of got into healthcare and knew that I liked healthcare, I got I went deep on that. So, and I think that's worked well as also because it helped me. Then I had something that was not related, and then to specialize back into healthcare was, I think, the right choice rather than an MBA or something broad again.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. And I agree with you. I actually look for people when I hire, I don't want to hire a cookie cutter. Oh, they've got, this tech degree and then they got this degree. It's like, okay, I respect that. We have enough of that. We need like different things. Like the fact that you do this movie stuff also means you're a very creative person. And that's what's been missing in healthcare tech for a long time. It's changing now, but we need more creative people. And then, when you marry it like you did with something specific at a master's level, it's like the best of both worlds. So I would never discourage anyone from entering. Like my best data center manager I ever had, she had a music degree. But you think about it, there's a lot of commonalities between music and structure and everything, and compared to a data center. Right. She was awesome. So I never hesitate to hire like strange degrees. I love it.
Well, let's talk hiring. You mentioned earlier about achieving a lot of what you've achieved through a team and hiring people who are smarter than you. What's your approach to make sure the people you're hiring are smarter than you? Because I think hiring is one of the big things that we do so much in society, and we train managers so poorly on how to screen, how to interview, how to look for good candidates, and we cross our fingers and hope we find a good candidate. So what's your approach to trying to make sure you're hiring good people and smart people?
Yeah, I think that the average, and I have no scientific basis for this, but just from observation in my career, I think it's like 50-50 crapshoot for most people. So they meet someone, checks the boxes, right? And then based on what? Maybe 2 hours together, maybe, and then maybe if it's a higher level position, like a CIO, they've met with 12 different people for 1 hour. But even you as the direct report, you maybe had dinner with them. It's very short time to make a decision. And then 50% of times it doesn't work out and it's dysfunctional. And so I thought a lot about that as I was starting my career and going through it. And I think I got to the point that I'm about 80%. I don't always get it right, but I'm pretty good now of hiring people smarter than myself. And, there's a lot of things that go into it. So I don't know that I could share a specific formula that's going to work for everyone. But, I sort of pick up on sort of attitude. So again, I don't really care about their degree. I think it's still, some of my kids will disagree with me because they purposely, so we had a rule in our house that you have to have at least 2 years. So I've got I've got several that are complete 4 years. But I've got a couple that one is one class short of his bachelor's, and he's doing it on purpose because, he's a multimillionaire now. He's like, Dad, see, you don't need a degree. But I'm like, Nick, you have a degree. You're just short one class. You did it all. And then I've got another one who went off and very creative into the music world, doing really well. And he did just the minimum. But you kind of look for that energy, the attitude, the intellectual curiosity. Are they creative? And then Dave, back to what we started off with, what are they doing outside of work? Mm-hmm. So, one of our recent hires that I'm really proud of, and she's like way smart. I'm not going to mention names because people will be watching this and they'll say, how come you didn't mention me? Although they'll probably figure it out anyways. But she's like doing all sorts of stuff. Every time I talk to her, she plays all sorts of instruments. She does all sorts of artwork, and then of course, and at the same time has a bunch of kids and does a bunch of foodie stuff. It's like, that person at work is going to be very much the same. We're not different typically between our work life and our personal life. So the more I learn about them as a person, I sort of translate that into the work life. So it's kind of hard to articulate because, again, I don't have a specific formula.
Sure.
But when people are doing things outside and are doing it with passion, that's another thing, is like, how do you pick up on passion? So I don't care what it is. Like, it could be food. So I had a CMIO who I served with for a long time. He was a big foodie. He was like super passionate about foodie. And I knew, hey, he's super passionate about food. That's part of his genetic makeup or who he is.
Right.
And he's going to be super passionate about saving people's lives with clinical informatics. So, and it was true. And so I found that to be true by and large throughout my career. So I've been very blessed because, as I said, I'm sort of average. And if there's a bunch of people like me, so I never try to hire me. It'll be boring. And two, we won't accomplish very much. But if I can hire people different than me, and then, back to what we were talking about in terms of degrees and experiences, I always tried to have at least one person in my direct reports that came from outside of healthcare. Because I think in healthcare, we've become part of the reason why we're not as innovative and digital transformative as we want to be, is we've become a little bit incestuous with the way that we hire. So we only hire people within healthcare IT. So, right? I only want to see a resume as someone who's been a director of IT.
Yep.
In a healthcare facility. Wrong. Or you have to have 20 years of experience in IT. Wrong.
Yep.
And so that's how we've hired. So I always worked with my HR people. There's another thing. It's like, I don't want any healthcare experience, and I don't care if they have 5 years or 20 years of IT experience. So some of my best hires, some guy came from music, television industry. Another guy came, like the best. Well, I shouldn't say the best because I had several good CISOs. One of the best CISOs I had, he had just got out of the Marines. And okay, so I remember two stories, and I want to tell them really quick.
Yeah, please.
It brings out the point. So this guy came out of the Marines, and I said, well, tell me about a tough time. I usually ask 3 questions. So I was like, so here's one of them. So what was the most transformative experience you ever had? What was then I leave it open like that. And he said, well, he was an enlisted guy too in the Marine. He said, well, I was in charge of Okinawa, the runway, the airport operations. And there was a terrible storm coming in, and we shut down operations. And, the highest general in the Marines was right there, and he needed to get back to the States. And he said, gunnery sergeant, whatever the rank is, I can't remember in the Marines, but, you need to open up the airway because, I've got to go. And he stood him down. And I said, wow. I hired that guy on the spot because think about it from a CISO point of view. You're going to have the CEO or other people say, no, we want that site open. No, he's making it do this. And you're going to compromise. I wanted a person with no compromise. And he's still my good friend. He's an awesome guy. So, but another story is one time I got called up to Kosovo. So I'd already gone out of the army, but one of my direct reports was a helicopter pilot who got activated to Kosovo. So the Army called me up one day. It's like, hey, will you go over to Kosovo and spend Christmas with the troops? I was like, oh, my gosh, of course I'm going. So I get off the plane, and then at the bottom of the plane is Sergeant First Class Jeff Masters. And he looked like Sergeant Rock. I don't know if you ever remember that comic book. Sergeant Rock, he was like chiseled, like beautiful Army guy that would give you confidence that you will never die in battle if you're next to this guy in a foxhole. And then during our time there, we're there for like 5-7 days. We're doing patrols, and then they awarded him. The general was like pounding some medal into him because he did so great about something, and maybe he got a promotion. And I told him I was so impressed just the way he worked with all of us, and there were dignitaries, senators and stuff, and he just treated everyone equal and really well. And I told him, I said, he was a plumber in the Army. I said, Sergeant First Class Masters, if you ever decide, I hope you don't, but if you ever decide to get out of the Army, I'm going to hire you. So I get a call a year later. Mr. Marx is Sergeant First Class Masters. I'm getting out of the Army, and I'd like to take you up on your offer. I had the hardest, one of the hardest projects ever at university hospitals. I was taking away everyone's printers. And, that was like perfect. So we're doing a master printer fleet, select printers, reduce cost of printing.
That's all never that popular.
Yeah. And it became like, what? It's like you took away something personal of theirs. And it was failing. And I was a new CIO, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going down in flames. And Masters came in. He took care of it. He went on, got promoted, director, vice president, got his bachelor's, got his master's, went off to some consulting firm, rock star. And he had no healthcare experience. He had no IT experience. He was a plumber, but he had an attitude of getting stuff done. So that's what I look for. I could tell you all sorts of stories like that, but those two just popped out as we're speaking. That's what I look for. I look for, man, people get it done, passion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that in particular, there's several things you mentioned in there that I want to dive into, but one of them I had sort of wanted to dive into before we started. And that is about how sometimes either because of our hiring or perhaps because of our cultures in healthcare, for whatever reason, my perception, I was going to ask if you agree with it, but you basically said it, is that we have not kept up as an industry with the innovation, the tech innovation that seems to be going on in other industries. And I wanted to see if you agree, but obviously do because you said that, and then some of the why. So you already mentioned maybe that we're too stuck on hiring healthcare people, but what other factors do you think contribute to gaps in creativity and innovation in the healthcare technology space?
Yeah. So another big area is risk aversion. So naturally, healthcare is risk averse because you're dealing with patients and patients' lives.
Sure.
And so that whole culture is pervasive in every area. And so it happened the same way. And so we're like really scared. Another thing is leaders are afraid of failure. They're afraid of getting fired. I always say, if you don't get fired at least once, and I've been fired before, if you don't get fired at least once, you're not doing your job. So you got to be pushing the envelope because you got to remember, you got to be very missional. Like for me, it's leveraging technology to save people's lives. I know we can do a lot more to leverage technology to save people's lives. I've seen it. I've experienced it with my teams. So I'm always pushing the envelope. I'm always pushing the edge. And I know I'm pushing people, and people get frustrated. And if they could fire me, I would be fired every job I've ever had. So people are afraid of that though, right? Because, well, I don't want to get fired because, will I get hired again? I don't want to get fired because, I got to provide for my family. All legitimate reasons in a way. But we need to then, as leaders, we need whatever area we control and people report up to us, we should encourage risk-taking without people's lives, encourage risk-taking where there's no lives impacted, and reward failure. So, one of the best examples I could ever give you, and I'm going to be doing grand rounds at Mayo Clinic, which scares me to death, sometime around the time that this will be published in February, March. And I'm going to talk about this one failure where so I don't know if you remember, Dave, because you're a lot younger, but Microsoft came out with this thing called Surface. Not the Surface today, but Surface was like a coffee table size. So if you think of an iPad as a coffee table, that was the original Surface. So this is like 2010. And if you go to YouTube and you look up Texas Health Resource Surface, I bet you'll see some videos. And so we were wanting to innovate with Microsoft, and they gave us some money to innovate, and we were all into it. And and it was a cool concept, but little did we know the iPad was coming, right? And more mobile capabilities. And so we spent a lot of time to do this thing for Alzheimer's, like how do you do early detection of Alzheimer's? And we're going to use this cool table. And then what happened was a few months later, the iPad comes out, and so, or other mobile devices. And it's like, dang, we just failed. We just spent, it was a minimal amount, but we just spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of brouhaha on this, and it failed. But what it ended up doing is we took that same thinking and technology, put it on the iPad, and along with some of the clinicians at Texas Health, we developed this application that then got used in the industry for early detection of Alzheimer's. So we took a failure and pivoted it into a success, but we kept that table. And I'll have to, my CMIO is still there. I'll have to ping him after we're done. But we kept that table in his office as a coffee table. And as a reminder to everyone, hey, it's okay to take risks. And sometimes we fail. Another thing is we don't talk about it and push it enough. So another thing that people can do, and we did this, one of the organizations where I served, is we did our own TEDx, right? So there's the TED Talks, which a lot of them are sort of pushing the boundaries of innovation, things like that. So we did a TEDx version, so one-day event. And then we incorporated, what we did is in addition to great speakers and all that kind of stuff from the outside, half of them were internal. And we had a contest going on for who could develop the coolest app. Because at the time, apps were brand new. So this, 10 years ago, maybe. And so that we did this whole contest and the top 3, like the top 10 got to present to the C-suite, which was like, cool for them. And then the C-suite we got their minds thinking, right, to try to help them think a little bit. And then the top 3 went to the TEDx event. They pitched in front of the whole audience, and the audience voted on the winner, and we funded the winner. Again, nominal amounts. And that person, what someone told me the other day is that person now leads digital strategy for some healthcare organization. And she wasn't even in IT. She was like,
that's awesome.
It wasn't housekeeping, but it was something ancillary. And she got this opportunity and did something great. So that's why, lack of risk taking, encouragement of innovation, the whole culture issue. Those are some of the things, but you can do things to accelerate. And we've done some other things as well to accelerate the, innovation.
Do you think that we've got a historical risk aversion and a culture in most organizations does not encourage failure tolerance, as you've mentioned. And I wonder, I know you're more on the tech side than the financial side, but margins are shrinking in healthcare provider universe. Do you feel like that's going to get better or worse? Because my gut, I hate to be cynical or pessimistic, my gut is that I think the risk tolerances and the encouragement of failure is going to be even harder, given that margins are so small. How much money do we have to experiment? What's your thought? Yeah,
it's a fair point. Margins, I think, at the time of this recording are about negative 0.02% on average. Of course, there's outliers on either side. And although, according to the things that I'm reading, I think there'll be less headwinds in the future. But yeah, there's a great imbalance in how the healthcare dollar is split up today that I'm not super happy about, but we won't go there.
Sure.
And yeah, so the point, so I'm just reinforcing your point in terms of, where we are today in the market. And yeah, so we have less money to experiment. And part of that too, and I won't go too far down this direction, is that we've spent a lot of money in one certain area. And so we haven't had the extra dollars to spend, on some of these more potentially maybe more risky, but could lead to great rewards. So we have all that sort of working against us. So back to your question, how do we still innovate, take chances, risk, experiment in a downtime? Well, one thing that we can do is take risk and experiment on things that will take costs out of the system. And then, if successful, reinvest. I always say half. My argument with the CFO is like, give me half of my savings, so I can reinvest in my team. We'll get half back. If we could take half of that and then invest in things that are innovative. So that's one thing is, hey, figure out ways. There's still ways to take out costs. The managed print services we talked about, which was, did that long time ago. There's still organizations where everyone has a printer and you add up all the dollars. That's a lot of dollars. And so there's still opportunity. And so that's one of the things, that I'm particularly focused on today in my current role is helping organizations do that because then they'll have money to spend to do, the things that'll, save people's lives. So that's one thing. The final thing, David, that I would suggest is that, in a lot of organizations, facilities gets a percentage of the budget to reinvest in things that come up. They don't identify them, but there's going to be new roofs, the physical plant.
Right.
They know that they're going to have to, depending on how big the health system is, they're going to have to replace one roof a year. They're going to have to replace HVAC systems. There's so many details, from a physical plant point of view that I've never seen it, and I've served at the very sophisticated organizations. I've never seen it at a detail level. They just get a percentage because everyone agrees. Yep, we're going to need a new roof. We're going to need a new parking garage. We're going to need this, that, and the other. So they get a percent of the budget. So it's like they get 1% of revenue or whatever, however the budget's determined.
Right.
So what I've argued for is the same thing when it comes to digital transformation. So when I led digital transformation at the Cleveland Clinic, that's one thing I argued for. They said, oh, that's a great plan. How much is it going to cost you? Of course, I said, what's it going to cost if we don't do it? But then I said, look, let's take 1%, not out of the IT budget, but this is a net new cost, 1%. And so that's one way of managing it so that whether you're in a down curve or an up curve, you still have money set aside for transformation. And like I said, David, I'm a realist. I'm pragmatic, and I know, okay, suddenly you're underwater, and we got to make cuts. But that 1% can be invested in things that take out costs.
Right.
But what happens is, even in sophisticated organizations, there's these mandates because they think it's fair, but it's not fair. Let's take 5% out of everyone's budget across the board, right? That's how much of management's done today. And it's just wrong. You might actually want to increase that 1%. You might want to say, let's increase that to 5% and take 6% out of everyone else, because that's where you're going to take some risks and you're going to figure out ways to pull costs out of the system. So we have solutions today. Other people do as well. So it's not about, Divergent. The solutions today to take costs out, but people don't want to invest the money, even though it could take costs out. Why? Because they don't have the money, because it was taken away from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So a very long answer. I'm sorry about that, but I'm pretty passionate about that. And there's ways around it. There's ways still to be successful.
No, I think it's fine that it's a long answer because it's a nuanced topic, right? And so much of this is in our industry and beyond our industry of healthcare is about that nuance. And you're right. The across the board cuts are common. I mean, we see those across industries when downtimes come. Sometimes organizations just go, okay, we're making a 5% cut, all divisions. And I think that is, I would agree with you. I think that is not the best way to do that. And one of the reasons I say that is the modern era is undergoing so much rapid technological, social, demographic, political change that merely keeping up is losing ground. If you're treading water, you're going to drown because you're sinking, right? Yeah. You must get ahead. You must continue to find ways to get ahead. And so I like your concept of, hey, if we save $1, let's save 50 cents and reinvest 50 cents. And I think that's a great concept.
If you look at companies, so going outside of healthcare, right? So I study a lot outside of healthcare. Is one of the last parts of the budget to go is R&D. So when I said that 1% in innovation or digital transformation, that's essentially R&D.
Right.
So, no, these companies are not dumb. They know to succeed in the future, even in a down market, they've got to invest in R&D. Because David, as you know, what's happening now is because we're not keeping up because of risk aversion, all the things we talked about, and the difficult financial headwinds. We're not keeping up. So all of a sudden, Amazon now on my Prime also says clinic.
Yep.
So we're being disintermediated by other non-healthcare, traditional healthcare players, and taking away more. And they're taking the top off, right? They're taking the things that make us make the most revenue so we can fund operations to save people's lives.
Right.
That was part of the heart behind writing digital transformation a couple of years ago, was like a wake-up call for our industry. So quit being so parochial and hiring just IT people from healthcare. Go outside, and we're seeing some of that. Let go of this risk, except for patient, direct patient care, and become more innovative and spend more on innovative ideas, or else you're going to be gone in the future. And we're seeing that happen already.
Right. So let me ask you to get your crystal ball out, just based on where we are in the conversation and in our hour together. 10 years from now, in Edward Marx's opinion, what does a leading, maybe not the average, and certainly probably not the laggards. The laggards are probably closing shop or barely keeping on, kind of like they are today. But what does a leading healthcare organization look like from a digital innovation experience, and I suppose I should be specific when I say a healthcare organization, I'm talking about a provider, whether that's hospitals, physicians, or, you know, some integrated type of network. I'm talking about the provider side. What does your crystal ball say the future looks like?
Yeah, so let me start high level and say some provocative things, and then I'll get down to kind of the more individual level. I think that there's going to be 10 health systems in 10 years. So I think a lot of the things that we were talking about, unless we make changes, are going to drive massive consolidation. So I think we're going to see a lot more M&A. We're already seeing M&A, and I just read another report today from Kaufman Hall suggesting the same, that M&A is going to continue to wrap up, go higher. So the smaller hospitals don't have the capability. They can't hire the right people. They don't have the financials to keep up with Walmart, to keep up with CVS and Amazon. So they're going to have to be parts of bigger systems. I can definitely see 3 mega systems emerge that are aligned with, and these are almost exclusive alignments with, like, I'm going to make up the name. I'm going to say names, but I'm not saying it's going to be these companies, but it's just to give you a sense. Let's just take, I'm picking this out of the hat. I'm going to pick a big health system, HCA. Okay. And HCA gets with Amazon. And they get with CVS. And I can see these 3 massive companies all competing against each other if things don't change at the local level. And I'm big, David, on the local community, because in these in cities, a lot of the center of the city is the healthcare institution, right? Because that's where you had your babies. That's where your kids, when they hurt their arms, went, and that's where you took your whole family, and that's where they got care. And if there's bad things that happen, that's where you got taken to. And they're such an integral part of the community. And there's a lot of community benefit that's done and bringing wellness in the communities, and it's good jobs in communities. And when we get to these mega systems, I don't know that same heart and soul is going to be there in that particular hospital that remains there, right? So I'm a big proponent. I'm not saying I don't necessarily want what I'm describing to happen. I think we can slow it down and be much more aggressive. But I think where we'll end up in 10 years now, to get to your specific question, like, what will it be like as a physician? Or I think we'll see a lot more, and the chat GPT thing, it's just really raising up a lot of interesting opportunities. So a lot more AI. So AI is just in its infancy. It's not going to be like blockchain. Blockchain went through hype but never materialized. Right. But AI definitely was hyped. We've seen it working. We'll see more of it. And also voice. So I definitely foresee a day, and I said this 3 years ago, when I was doing digital transformation at the clinic, where you'll interact, and you're seeing some of this early on right now, where you'll interact and it'll be nothing in between us, kind of like you and I just speaking, but in a medical consult, and the voice is getting, being taken up. But at the same time, from an AI capability, I, as a clinician, might have a earpiece, and based on what you're saying, could be tonal, could be voice change, or based on what you're saying, the system will also be looking in your genetic code, because we have your genetic profile on hand, and you have your EHR and all your records. And based on all this, real time, making a suggestion for the next best question for that clinician. So then the clinician would be like, oh, David, what about this, and that? Otherwise, there's no way docs can consume all the information that's out there. Right. They don't have time to do in-depth analysis working with you. You're one of 20 or 30 people they saw that day. As great as people as they are, and good-hearted people, they just can't possibly do it. So I think voice, AI, mobile will be huge game changers. And again, we're seeing the early indications of that now. But it takes a while to really get super practical. The chat GPT, capabilities really, related to AI, but a lot more can be done preventative. A lot more can be done. We didn't even talk about wearables. I don't know, David, are you a wearable person? Do you have a watch that tracks your life or anything like that? Or ring?
No, I used to. I just found that they kept dying after like a year, and I wasn't going to keep donating my money to the company for something that only lasts 12 months. So I kind of moved away from that. But I'm looking forward to, like, they got Google Glass, but I'm looking forward to when they get that to like contacts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's happening. Google Glass is a great example. We did experiments with it actually at the clinic, and then it proved impractical, but now it's coming back again. But I'm a big wearables person, and I use it. But the problem with wearables today is that it's mostly used by people who use that data anyway. Mm-hmm. So, like, I'm already a triathlete, and I use it to. My coach gets all my data, and I use it to look at trends analysis. What's my VO2, and do I need to increase my FTP on my cycling and wattage? But I think it's getting to the point that it'll get more mainstream. So, like, these watches can do amazing things now. I use a Garmin because it's more specific to sports, but the Apple Watch, of course, has a lot of great capabilities. I think we'll see those capabilities continue to be built out, and then we'll figure out a way that the physician isn't encumbered with all that data, but they only get the very, exactly what they need to know. So I think those are some of the trends that are coming.
I agree with you that I don't know about 10 systems, but I agree with both of the sort of sub elements of that I think M&A will continue unless the feds step in and do some antitrust stuff, which they're making noise about. And I also agree that that's not necessarily desirable because local control is often better. And not always, but often better. And so I agree with both of those points. Within sort of the future forecast, I hope there is some way to make what these days they call direct primary care. They used to call it concierge, but the idea is your primary care doctor having a much smaller patient load so that they can actually listen to you and pay attention and coordinate between multiple specialists or help you with your diet or, I hope technology enables us to overcome a massive physician shortage and bring direct primary care to more people because I went to it in the last year. It's so much better than the traditional model. I don't know if you do direct primary care, but I wish everybody could have it, but without major technology enablers, I just don't know how it's feasible. And I don't know, any thoughts on the direct primary care model and how tech might, get us there? Any thoughts?
I think people will be, the population will be better served. People will be more well because of the attention that you get. Yeah. We went to concierge medicine 3 years ago, not because, we felt we needed or we were privileged or what have you, but we went there because our longtime PCP quit his practice. He was the chief of staff at our health system. He quit. He's like, I'm tired of dealing with all this bureaucracy. And so he went. And so we were like, well, for continuity of care, and we like him, and he knows us so well, we followed him. So, and then the other thing was like, I want to know what it's like. And it is a great experience. And if you follow what he says, again, it still comes down to patient will. Sure. If you follow the care, you should be a lot better off. And so, how do we scale that? Because not everyone's going to, in addition to my insurance, and I now got to pay, for this concierge medicine. It's got to become just part of what everyone has. And I think it's provocative thought. I have not thought of it the way that you have, David. So, but I could see with the technology enablers that we talked about with AI and, voice and, different capabilities, wearables, that maybe we could get there. I think we're going to have to become comfortable with a little bit, maybe less human touch. So I'm a big human touch person, so it's hard for me to say it. But, the plane that you fly on to vacation, only, as I understand it, and I have a nephew that's a pilot for Southwest, they fly it when it's landing and taking off. Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah. So, and because we have this, it's like going with not wireless cars, but driverless cars, right? Mm-hmm. We still want someone there for a while. We'll get there. And I think it might be the same way with concierge medicine or, the new way of delivering care, where we're going to have to get used to the fact that these, and if you look at ChatGPT, and test it out, it's like passing MBA exams, all that kind of stuff, mm-hmm. And medical diagnosis as well, that maybe your first interaction and it's really easy. And you don't have to wait in line or go drive somewhere or sit in a waiting room reading 3-year-old magazines. You can go online, and then that would be captured by your PCP who's controlling all this, and they could see anything, oh, wow, look, Ed in the last 4 times has been inquiring about XYZ. We better call him and check it out. Or, I think that's one way of scaling it, because I don't think you can scale it just with humans alone.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, particularly not with some of the major demographic challenges globally in terms of the aging workforce and some of these things. As we wind into the last bit of our time together, I did want to give a bit of time for you to kind of hype your model with Divergent, because I thought that was also provocative in terms of you're trying to make essentially a services company that isn't from a vendor perspective you had in your bio. And I certainly believe that a lot of organizations, not just healthcare organizations, a lot of organizations don't use consultants well. It's that sort of trope of like, let's hire the consultants to tell us what we already know, and stuff like that. So can you both, can you sort of speak to what you're trying to achieve with your organization, as well as how folks who might be out there in whether the healthcare universe or whatever, could use consultants better?
Yeah.
What's your mindset on that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we really tried to flip the model. When I considered becoming CEO of Divergent, I was like, well, I don't want to be like a typical advisory firm. And so how do we flip the model? And I thought about when I was a CIO, I'd literally sit there, and David, you probably do as well. You meet with vendors and you're like, why do 7 people show up in my office? Why did they just show me 30 slides in 30 minutes and I had 2 minutes? They asked me 2 minutes worth of questions. We just tried to flip the model. So I hired a lot of ex-CIOs, CMIOs. And then it's like, okay, how did we prefer working with a vendor? Let's become that company. So I don't know that we're 100% there. We'll probably never be 100% there, but we're sort of iterating and have really flipped the model. And so we do things differently. So it's like, I can mention a few things that we do differently to get at your other question. And some other advisory firms probably do a couple of them, but probably not all of them. One, everything's tailored. So one, we don't bring slides, and we don't bring more than 2 people, and we do research ahead of time. So we're not going to ask you, because that's what they come to me. Well, tell us your strategies. It's Cleveland Clinic. You want me to tell you that again? I've done podcasts. It's public. It's been written about. Yep. You didn't do that research, or where did you work last? Well, you don't know. So we do the research on the company. We do the research on the person, so that when we meet with them, we talk and we ask questions that we couldn't otherwise get to, and then we just tell them if we think that, hey, we've got this secret sauce here that might help you, and if we can't help them, we tell them, yeah, can't help you there, but we might know some people that can. So we try to be way different. So some of the differentiation is tailoring. No one gets the same 2 slides. So I told you that we have a max 2 slides. So afterwards, after I meet with you, I'll be like, don't take notes. Let's just have a conversation. They'll ask, tell me about Divergent. I said, don't take notes. I'll send you 2 slides. So our 2 slides, no one gets the same 2 slides. It's all tailored. It's specific to their organization. It takes a little bit more effort, but I believe it's worth it. I have a clinician co-leader. So we know we're here to serve patients ultimately. So why wouldn't you have a clinician? So where it's appropriate, he is with me. So we sort of co-present, co-lead. 3 is we're very empathetic. So I remind everyone, and our mission and vision talks about it, where at the end of the day, we're helping organizations who are taking care of patients. So we're not like, yeah, of course, we want to make money and all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, we're trying to save people's lives through the leverage of technology. And so how do we help organizations do that? And so at all of our meetings, and this is early on, but at our last leadership meeting, we had a patient. So I just call my buddies. This was in Austin, Texas. I call my buddies down there. Hey, I need a patient. So we had a patient. It was a great experience, a tearjerker experience for some, hearing directly from a patient. And we also bring in an executive. It's not a sales thing. We just, hey, can you come on over? We're meeting over here, and we'd love just to hear your point of view. And they come in and we share. So we got the heart of the customer. We hear the customer and we see the patient. So we do that. So very empathetic. So those are some of the things that we do. Yeah. And so what I tell people is, don't be that consultant that just tells them what they should already know. or makes them dependent on us. You know, it's the way consulting works. I know you know it, but I don't know that everyone in the audience knows it, is their goal is really to keep getting sales.
Right.
You know, that first came to me, I was working at HCA a long time ago as a director, and I got to be friends with these guys from, I think it was E&Y, that big engagements. And they were always like asking me other things. And I thought they were there to like serve me and help me with this particular project. And I got to be pretty good friends with them. And they told me how it works. You know, they get paid extra. They, you know, hey, have you ever thought about this? You know, and so while, yeah, of course we want to make money and all that kind of stuff and pay fair wages. Ultimately, our heart, though, is really to help save people's lives. So let's just do a really good job. And how we'll get paid, how we'll get more work is by doing a really good job and allowing them to run with it. So they're going to remember us. Hey, do you remember Divergent? They helped us with this digital transformation, and they didn't try to sell us. But now we have another project, and I like their approach.
Yeah,
that's how we earn money. Not, I'm telling you, I don't want to be like that magician guy a few years ago on PBS who revealed all the secrets, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it, like writing about it. Like, hey, when you work with a consultant, realize that what they're trying to do is get the next sale. They're less interested, generally speaking. Now, I can't throw everyone under the bus, but there's a lot of them that they're not so interested in giving you a high quality deliverable. They're interested in that next sale. So I'm like, no. Give them high quality deliverable. There's no next sale, but the next time they need someone, Divergent. I'd rather do it that way than it's too slimy the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I may, to summarize that, I think 3 points come out of that to me that are good across industries. And then we'll wrap it up here. So out of that, I get demand more in terms of prep from the sales and business development people, the people coming to the table to have done their legwork.
Yeah.
Demand less in terms of throwing slides at me, upselling, cross-selling, etc., and ask consultants, potential consultants, how they're getting voice of the customer. Is it on their board? Do they have a customer or a patient if they're a healthcare consultant? But if they're outside of healthcare, just customer. Do they have customers on their board? Do they have advisory boards? Maybe not be on the board of trustees or board of directors, but some sort of customer advisory board. How are they getting the voice of the customer into their processes? Those three sort of tactics probably would improve the dynamics with professional services. So I love it. I love it. Ed, where can people find you? Where can they find Divergent?
Yeah, divergent.com. And and on LinkedIn, you'll find Divergent, and you can look me up. I talk to everyone. So many, like David, I was telling you earlier, so many people poured themselves into me. I owe it to pour back to others. So if anyone ever wants to chat about anything, I'm always available on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, Edward Marx, thank you for sharing some of your story with me, some of your vision for the future, and some of your advice for other people out there. I really appreciate you being here with me on the podcast. Yeah,
thank you for having me. I've looked up the other ones. I love the content. I love the guests, and I'm very honored to be part of this. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.